Coming in at 5, The Three Snake Leaves. One of two Grimm brothers stories we have on our list, The Three Snake Leaves goes as follows. A powerful king had a daughter who was very beautiful, but also very strange. Although she had many suitors, she refused to marry anyone who would not agree to be buried alive with her if she died first. Reasoning, if he loves me with all his heart, of what use will life be to him afterwards? I mean, respect. Meanwhile, a peasant boy is left home to earn money as a soldier. When battle was joined, most of his comrades were slaughtered, but the boy rallied the survivors and led them to victory. For his bravery, the king rewarded him with priceless treasure and made him a knight. Visiting the king's castle, the boy fell in love with the strange and beautiful princess and agreed to her conditions for marriage. The two lived happily for many years until the princess became ill and died. Her grieving husband immediately began looking for a way out of his promise, but the king's guards locked him in the princess's tomb to die. While trapped in the tomb, he saw a snake slither through the cracks in the wall, so he killed it to protect his wife's corpse. Before he could decide to eat it, a second snake appeared with 3 leaves, which it placed on the first snake's wounds, bringing it back to life. Both snakes disappeared, but the leaves remained on the ground, and the boy used them to bring the princess back to life. The two escaped from the vault and boarded a ship back to the castle. However, the leaves had changed the princess cruelly, and she fell in love with the ship's captain. They plotted to throw the boy into the sea so that they could marry. A servant saw the act and rode after the boy, saving him. Somehow the two got back to the kingdom before anyone else and told the king the whole story. When the princess and the captain returned, the king sentenced them to death by sending them out to the sea in a ship pierced full of holes. To be fair, she deserved it. Coming in at 4, Mother Hole. This spooky tale tells of a widow and her 2 daughters. One, her biological daughter, was ugly and lazy, the other, her stepdaughter, was beautiful and kind. For this, the widow despised her stepdaughter, forcing her to sit by a well, spinning cloth until her fingers bled. One day, the stepdaughter accidentally dropped her spindle into the well. Not knowing what else to do, she jumped into the well after it, but instead of finding herself trapped in a well, she awoke in a beautiful meadow full of sunshine. Walking around the strange new land, she came across a baker's oven full of bread, begging to be taken out before it burnt, and an apple tree which begged her to pick the ripest apples. Finally, the girl arrived at the house of Mother Hole, an old, ugly lady who asked her to clean her cottage. The girl did everything Mother Hole asked and was rewarded by being covered from head to toe in gold, given her spindle back, and returned to the human world. Impressed by her new wealth, the stepmother decided to send her own daughter down the well also. However, the lazy daughter refused to take the bread out of the oven or shake the tree. Her work for Mother Hole was so lazy she was asked to leave. Instead of gold, she was coated from head to toe in burning pitch, which stuck to her for the rest of her life. Just don't be lazy, I guess. Coming in at number 3, Fitcher's Bird. Fitcher's Bird goes as follows. Once upon a time, a strange beggar spent his days kidnapping young women. Visiting the home of 3 sisters, he persuaded the oldest to let him inside. As soon as the beggar touched her, she was forced to jump into his pack. He then carried her away to his golden house, where he promised to give her everything she desired if she would stay and become his wife. He then announced that he had to leave for a short time, giving her an egg to keep safe and forbidding her from entering one particular room on pain of death. After he left, curiosity of course overcame the woman, and she entered the forbidden room. She found a basin filled with blood and the mutilated remains of dead girls. A large axe and a chopping block lay conveniently nearby. Out of fear, the woman dropped the egg, which then became covered in blood and could not be cleaned, no matter how hard she tried. When the beggar returned and saw the bloody egg, he dragged her into the forbidden room and chopped her up. He then returned to the original home and took another sister, who suffered the same fate. Finally, he returned for the youngest, however this time the beggar met his match. Suspicious, the sister hid the egg before entering the room. Discovering her dead sisters, she put the pieces together, resurrecting them. When the beggar returned, he announced that she had passed the test and would be his true bride. As a wedding present, the girl asked him to take a basket of gold to her father, but secretly hid her 2 sisters inside the basket instead. She then placed a skull in the window so it would seem like she was watching him, and covered herself in honey and feathers in order to hide in the trees disguised as a bird. When the beggar returned and his friends arrived for the wedding, the girl's brothers arrived, locked them in the home, and burned them all alive inside. Coming in at 2, The Singing Bone. Hailing from the Grimm storybook, The Singing Bone goes as follows. A giant boar terrorized a poor kingdom, ruining crops and tearing peasants apart. In desperation, the king offered his only daughter to whoever killed the beast. 2 brothers volunteered, one out of pride and the other out of kindness. To improve their chances of finding the pig, they split up and entered the forest from opposite sides. sides. In the forest, the younger brother encountered a dwarf who sensed the boy's good heart and gave him an enchanted spear capable of killing the boar. The boy then came across the boar and the enchanted spear split the beast's heart in two. Walking to the castle with the beast on his back, the boy found his brother drinking in a tavern. Seeing that his brother had won the challenge, the older brother offered him some wine to celebrate his victory. Once his sibling had become good and drunk, the older brother murdered him and buried him under a bridge before taking the boar to the king and claiming the princess. He claimed that his brother had been torn to pieces by the boar. The brother and his new wife lived happily for many years. Then a wandering shepherd came across a weathered bone, which he decided to fashion into a mouthpiece for his horn. Of course, the bone belonged to the murdered brother, and when the shepherd blew into it, the horn began singing a terrible song of murder. The shepherd then took the instrument to the king, who ordered the earth beneath the bridge to be dug up, discovering the body of the younger brother. As a punishment, the older brother was sewn into a sack and thrown into the sea to drown. And finally, coming in at number 1, the 3 army surgeons. This creepy tale goes as follows. Once there were 3 proud army surgeons who decided they were the best in the world and in turn began traveling around to boast of that fact. They eventually came to an inn in the middle of a secluded forest where the innkeeper, skeptical, asked them to prove their talents. To his surprise, they agreed. The first surgeon hacked off his own hand and pledged to reattach it in the morning. The second did the same thing with his heart, and the third ripped out his own eyes. The surgeons were confident because they secretly had a magic lotion that reattached severed body parts. The impressed innkeeper gave the hand, heart and eyes to a serving girl, ordering her to watch over them until morning. However, that night the serving girl's secret soldier lover visited and the two quickly became distracted, allowing a cat to sneak in and eat the severed body parts. When the girl discovered the missing pieces, her soldier promised to replace them, beginning by cutting the hand off a recently hanged thief in town square. He then sliced the heart out of a slaughtered pig, and finally he caught up with the cat and ripped out his eyes. The next day, the surgeons magically reattached their body parts. However, when they continued on their journey, the first surgeon found himself constantly trying to steal money from strangers, and the second surgeon was unable to fight the urge to roll around in the mud. At night, the third couldn't sleep and could see mice running across the dark floor. Realizing something was wrong, the surgeons returned to the inn and demanded their own body parts back. However, the girl had already run away with her soldier and no one else knew what had happened to them. In at number 5, we have the juniper tree. One of many Brothers Grimm's tales on our list, the juniper tree tells the story of a wealthy couple who would pray to God every night to grant them a child. One winter, under the juniper tree in their courtyard, the wife peeled an apple. However, when doing so, she cut her finger and drops of blood fell onto the snow. This led her to wish for a child to be as white as snow and as red as blood. 6 months later, the wife became very sick from eating juniper berries and asked her husband to bury her beneath the tree. A month later, she gave birth to a baby boy, as white as snow and as red as blood. The wife died of happiness and was buried under the tree. The husband remarried and had a daughter named Marlinchen. The new wife loved Marlinchen but despised her stepson. She wanted him to have nothing and wished that Marlinchen would inherit her father's wealth instead of the stepson. One afternoon after school, the new wife planned to lure the stepson into an empty room containing a chest of apples. However, Marlinchen saw the chest and asked for one. The stepmother accepted. However, when the boy entered the room and reached for an apple, the stepmother slammed the lid on his neck, decapitating him. She then goes on to cook the boy and serve him as soup to her husband, and during dinner he states that the food is delicious. Then out of the juniper tree emerges mist and a bird. The bird flies around the town singing a song, and on the way picks up a millstone. It returns to the home and drops the millstone on the stepmother's head, killing her. It is revealed that the son is the bird and he reunites with his family. The end. In at number 4, the Robber Bridegroom. Another Grimm brothers tale on our list, the Robber Bridegroom begins as follows. Once upon a time there was a miller who had a beautiful daughter. Now when she came of age, he wanted her to be provided for and well married. He thought, I quote, "If a respectable suitor comes and asks for her hand in marriage, I will give her to him." Now not long after this, a suitor did come forward who seemed to be very rich. The miller, not finding any faults with the man, promised his daughter to him. Now the girl, however, did not like the suitor that much. She didn't trust him, and whenever she saw him or thought about him, she felt a sense of horror and dread. On one occasion, the man asked why she had never visited him. She responded with, "I don't know where you live." He creepily responded with, "My house is out in the dark woods." Freaky stuff. He then went on to say, "Next Sunday you must come out to me. I've already invited guests. I will make a trail of ashes that you can find your way through the woods." The day arrived and the girl prepared herself to walk through the woods to the man's house, however, she had a terrible feeling. So with her she brought peas that she scattered along the path to the right and left. She walked the whole day until she came to the middle of the woods where it was the darkest, and there stood a house by itself. She went in, but no one was there. Suddenly though, she heard a voice. Turn back, you young bride. You are in a murderer's house. The voice was seemingly coming from a bird. Once again it said, turn back, you young bride. You are in a murderer's house. Very creepy. Then she encountered an old woman who told her that people would kill her and eat her unless the old woman protected her behind her cask. Then out of nowhere, a band of robbers arrived with the young woman whom they killed and were preparing to eat. They chopped off the woman's fingers, and in the process her ring flew off, landing in the lap of the hiding woman. The old woman went on to drug the robbers, and when they fell asleep, the two women ran away, following the peas that the woman had spread. Now when the wedding day arrived, the man urged the woman to tell a story. So she said she would tell a dream she had, and proceeded to tell of the murderer's den. However, when she told the part of the story with the finger being cut off, she produced the ring, and in turn the robbers and the man were put to death. The end. Coming in at number 3, the death of the little hen. At this point I think we can accept that this entire list is going to be Brothers Grimm stories. Like, I don't know any other Germans that were writing fairy tales. So let's just move on. This fairy tale goes as follows, I quote, "One time the little hen and the little rooster went to Nut Mountain." First of all, yes, this is in the fairy tale, and no, it is not a euphemism. Anyway, back to the story. And they agreed that whoever would find a nut would share it with the other one. Now the little hen found a large nut, but wanting to eat the kernel by herself, she said nothing about it. However, the kernel was so thick that she could not swallow it down. It got stuck in her throat, and fearing that she would choke to death, she cried out, "Little rooster, I beg you to run as fast as you can to the well and get me some water, or else I'll choke to death." Now the little rooster ran to the well and asked it to give them some water, and that they'll take it to the little hen on Nut Mountain who was choking to death. However, the well demanded that the rooster runs to the bride and get some red silk from her. The rooster did just that, ran to the bride and asked for the silk to give to the well so that they could get some water to give to the hen on Nut Mountain. The bride answered that they must first run and get a wreath, and that it was caught on a willow branch. You can see where this story is going, can't you? The rooster then took off and pulled the wreath from the branch and took it to the bride, who gave him red silk, which he took to the well, and the well gave him some water, which he took to the little hen. However, when he arrived, she had already choked to death. Think that's sad? Wait till you hear what happens next. A group of animals then show up and take the distraught rooster with them to bury the hen. They pull up to an area, but something happens and the carriage they were riding and rolls back and crushes all the animals to death, except for the rooster, who sits there with the little hen and eventually grieves for so long he dies. The end. Coming in at number 2, The Strange Feast. Now this story quite literally concerns a blood sausage and a liver sausage. Yep, you guys loved the sausage in the last fairy tales list we did, so here is another. You're welcome. So a blood sausage and a liver sausage are friends, and blood sausage invites the liver sausage for a meal at her house. However, when liver sausage walks through the door, she sees all sorts of strange things. She saw many steps, and on each of them was something different. A broom and a shovel were fighting with each other on one, and a monkey with a big wound on his head on another. The liver sausage was of course frightened by all these peculiar things, but nevertheless she entered and was greeted by the blood sausage. The liver sausage began to ask about the strange things on the stairs. However, the blood sausage pretended not to hear, classic move, and made it seem as though it wasn't worth discussing. Not long after, the blood sausage left the room to go to the kitchen and take care of the food. During this time, the liver sausage began walking back and forth in the room, thinking about the strange things on the stairs, until someone appeared. She didn't know who it was, but they stated, "Let me warn you, liver sausage, you're in a bloody murderous trap. Better get out of here quickly if you value your life." The liver sausage didn't think twice and ran out the door as fast as she could. When she made it far enough away, she turned back around to look at the house and saw the blood sausage standing in the attic window with a long knife glistening in the night as though it had just been sharpened. The blood sausage then yelled out, "If I had caught you, I would have had you." And finally, coming in at number 1, Herr Korbes. This is yet another Brothers Grimm story that almost sounds like a joke, but I trust you it isn't. It is very real and very strange, so I'm gonna read this story verbatim for you to really get that full effect. I quote, "Once upon a time there was a rooster and a hen who wanted to take a journey together. So the rooster built a handsome carriage with 4 red wheels and hitched 4 mice to it. The hen climbed aboard with the rooster and they drove away together. Not long afterward they met a cat who said, 'Where are you going?' The rooster answered, 'We're on our way to Herr Korbes' house.' 'Take me with you,' said the cat. The rooster answered, 'Gladly. Climb on behind so you won't fall off the front. Be careful not to get my red wheels dirty.' 'Roll wheels, whistle mice, we're on our way to Herr Korbes' house.' Then a millstone came along, then an egg, snake, then a duck, then a pin, and finally a needle. They all climbed aboard the carriage and rode with them, but when they arrived at Herr Korbes' house, he was not there. The mice pulled the carriage into the barn, the hen and the rooster flew onto a pole, the cat sat down in the fireplace, and the duck in the water bucket. The egg rolled itself up in a towel, the pin stuck itself into a chair cushion, the needle jumped onto the bed in the middle of the pillow. The millstone lay down above the door. Then Herr Korbes came home. He went to the fireplace wanting to make a fire, and the cat threw ashes into his face. He ran quickly into the kitchen to wash himself, and the duck splashed water into his face. He wanted to dry himself off with the towel, but the egg rolled against him, broke, and glued his eyes shut. Wanting to rest, he sat down in the chair and the pin pricked him. He fell into a rage and threw himself onto his bed, but when he laid his head on the pillow, the needle pricked him, causing him to scream and run out of the house. As he ran through the front door, the millstone jumped down and struck him dead. Herr Korbes must have been a very wicked man. Fun stuff. The best fairy tales always end in death, I guess. It seemed like Herr Korbes didn't really deserve that. He just wanted to come home, but he was attacked in his own home.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Sleeping Beauty. I'm willing to bet most people's familiarity with this story stops at the Disney telling, and if you conjure up a different version of the slumbering wonder, it's just as family friendly, if not more. But I'm here to tell you that all your thoughts about Miss Snoozing Sweetie are wrong. In our modern, toothless society, we all hear about a princess who pricks her finger and suffers a terrible curse. She sleeps, forever beautiful and undisturbed in a tall tower. Only true love's kiss will awaken the sleeping princess, which, after a battle with a dragon, does just that. How lovely. The happy couple can live forever together. Sure, the curse is scary and the evil witch is a serviceable antagonist, but nothing bad really happens. Well, if you look back to the origins of the tale, you'll find a much more disturbing story. There is no curse in the classic Sleeping Beauty, instead it's a prophecy. She still falls asleep thanks to a piece of flax that pricks her finger, and she's still hidden away in a room in a tower. But no prince comes to rescue her. Nope, instead she is coveted by a king who decides to impregnate her while she sleeps, like a Kill Bill situation. Not good. For 9 months, she continues to sleep as 2 children grow inside her. She then gives birth, still asleep, and the children crawl around. One of the kids, adventurous as kids tend to be, decides to suck on his mother's finger, and in doing so, he removes the flax and awakens her from her long slumber. Imagine, if you would, finding yourself in a similar situation. You've been asleep for an ungodly amount of time, and suddenly you're awake, and you've given birth to 2 kids. And the kids are a result of non-consensual intercourse courtesy of a king who will likely deny everything. Yikes. Coming in at number 4, we've got Cinderella. Man, who would wear glass slippers anyways? There's no give to glass. Even if the fit was perfect, you'd be killing your feet, and the likelihood of that shoe shattering while you walk is sky high. Try not to conjure up too many images of walking on glass. Sorry, I'll get to the actual story now. Cinderella is a tale about being quietly beautiful and finding true love, right? You know the story. Poor Cinderella toils away as the ugly stepchild / unpaid laborer in her stepmother's home. Her stepsisters torment her, and her stepmother works her to the bone. But she knows she's beautiful, and so does her fairy godmother. So when the royal ball is thrown, she gets magically dressed up and stuns crowds with her brand new beauty. However, she has to dip before she reverts to her peasant self, because who could ever love a poor? Thankfully, she drops a slipper and the prince tracks her down based on her feet. A little bit of Tarantino syndrome, eh? Not exactly a family-friendly fixation, but that's the version Disney went with. In the original, the slippers are made of squirrel fur, and the stepsisters intercept the prince's quest to find his lover. Knowing that they would not fit Cinderella's shoes, they literally hack off parts of their feet, and they almost get away with it. It took this prince, who supposedly was in love with Cinderella, a moment to realize that they weren't her and were actively bleeding from the feet. And even then, it was thanks to the help of some doves that he noticed. Doves that went on to peck out the stepsisters' eyes. Gather round, kids. I want to tell you the totally appropriate story of the step-siblings who amputated parts of their feet and then had birds gouge their eyes out. Great show. Coming in at number 3, we've got Hansel and Gretel. I mean, most folks probably already know how dark Hansel and Gretel is based on the myriad gritty fantasy movies that are released every few years. Like, how many sexy, violent versions of Hansel and Gretel can Hollywood churn out? I guess it's in the public domain, but we've got enough. In the original fairy tale, they weren't leathered up adults proficient at throwing axes and hitting bullseyes with longbows. They were just ordinary kids. Ordinary, naive kids who would believe a nasty witch. I suppose the version most people know would be that Hansel and Gretel had to journey through the woods and didn't want to get lost. Some versions give the two kids a tragic backstory too. An awful wife forces her husband to abandon their kids. Downtrodden and rejected, they wander about and leave a trail of breadcrumbs to mark their path. They're caught by a witch who decides they'll be good to eat. If I were a witch, I would simply ask the children nicely to give me some blood voluntarily, but hey. The story isn't just a lighthearted romp though. Some versions say the kids simply manage to escape from the gingerbread house, but in doing so, they leave out all sorts of juicy details. Gretel is forced to work as a slave, and Hansel is force-fed and poked with a stick to see if he's good to eat. Eventually, the witch decides it's time to roast Hansel and fires up the old oven. Before she can baste the young lad in rosemary oil and butter, Gretel manages to body slam the witch into the oven, and the two become murderous burglars. I mean, they had every right to kill her and steal her stuff, but it's still pretty grim. So they go home and find out their stepmother has died after this. Hurrah! Wait, Dad, why didn't you come looking for us? Coming in at number 2, we've got Rapunzel. Putting the logistics of climbing a rope attached to someone's head and neck aside, Rapunzel can still be pretty dark. Most marketers would like you to believe that Rapunzel's story involves a dashing rogue and a capable princess who steal away into the night after a daring escape. They can sell more chameleon plushies that way. Unfortunately, the original story involves a lot more hardship. First of all, Rapunzel isn't necessarily a princess. In some tellings, she's the firstborn daughter of a very poor family that had been caught stealing from the witch who owned a tower. The witch struck up a deal with her parents. Take whatever you want, but I keep the kid. Some loving parents, eh? So years later, the dashing prince finds the beautiful girl with long, luxurious locks. I guess a haircut was too much work for the old witch. He visits her often and hails her from the ground. Eventually, he decides that he's had enough of shouting up the tower. He wants to get up close and personal, if you know what I mean. So he climbs up on her hair and ends up running into the witch, who then tosses him from the tower, and he lands in the thorns below. The poor lad is blind now and likely all busted up from being tossed headfirst from the tower. The girl is then kicked out by the witch for her impropriety, and the couple gets to live together, but not exactly happily ever after, you know, thanks to the blindness and lack of resources. Another version even tells the tale of the prince getting her pregnant and then disappearing. Pick your partners wisely, kids. And finally, at number 1, we've got Little Red Riding Hood. We all know how this one goes. Little Red is running through the woods on the way to her grandma's house. A wolf, wanting to make a meal of her, runs ahead, kills her grandmother, and takes a place in bed. Red Riding Hood is surprised that her grandmother has taken on the appearance of a wolf, but doesn't pay it too much mind. Right before the wolf chows down, a heroic and handsome woodsman kicks down the door and kicks some wolf butt. But that's not really how the story goes, now is it? In some versions, the woodsman only saves her because he finds her attractive. And guess how he expects her to pay him back. In others, there is no woodsman and no grandma, just a little girl being tricked and eaten by a wolf. Really, it's a tale teaching young women to avoid sexual predators. If you talk to men you don't know, or wolves in this case, be ready to die. Pretty good advice, actually. Are you calling your parents as we speak, demanding to know why they let you read such terrifying tales as a kid? I don't blame you, it can come as a shock. But hey, these stories wouldn't be so famous if they didn't capture the minds of all sorts of people throughout the ages. And what better way to hold attention than by adding some blood? Coming in at number 5, we've got Snow White. Ah, Snow White, friend to animals everywhere, legendary bird impersonator, and mother figure to 7 little dwarves. How lovely, right? But unfortunately, Disney's first animated musical fairy tale feature doesn't tell the whole story like it is, so you might want to reconsider all of that grumpy merch you own. You know, the stuff with him standing cross-armed and sassy with a slogan like, "Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee," because I'm not so sure you want your good-natured prickliness associated with the story we're about to unravel. You ready? Okay. So, you know how Snow White eats the poison apple and falls asleep, and then the prince comes along and kisses her back to life? It's kind of creepy out of context, sure, but the real story is even creepier. Apparently she was actually awoken by the jostling of his horse as he was riding back to the castle, with her that he assumed was dead strapped to the saddle. Uh-oh. Absolutely laden with taboo implications, but we'll save the discussion of necro stuff for another day. Right. So that's one dark twist you probably weren't aware of. Another is that Snow White's father, the king, was actually the reason she ran away from home in the first place. He thought she was radiant, gorgeous, too pretty for this world, and he got obsessive enough that she had to go before he went a little too far with it. What about the dwarves though? Well, they're not the adorable, helpful group of tiny bearded dudes we've all come to know and love. Apparently, they don't just welcome her into their home after she cleans up a little. No, they literally restrain and enslave her. And there may or may not be some degradation of a sexual nature. Oh boy. Add in some really gruesome torture and a molten hot fate for the evil queen, and you've got a gnarly tale. So yeah, Snow White is not the pure as snow story you might have imagined. Hey, if If you're liking this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out with the algorithm. On with the video. Coming in at number 4, we've got The Little Mermaid. Poor Ariel. The idea that a young woman would give up her voice wholesale so she can woo a prince is actually a pretty dark tale to begin with, but it gets darker. A lot darker. So in the version most folks are familiar with, our red-haired water dweller manages to strike up a deal with a sea witch in order to have a chance of scoring with a prince. Tail for legs, voice for no voice, and a whole lot of misfortune. But in that version, at least there are some happy, fun talking sea creatures and a nice ending. Not so much in the OG edition. After everything Ariel goes through, from giving up her life underwater to adjusting to solid ground to being at the mercy of a terrible entity, one would hope she would have some sort of comeback arc. Well, not so much. Pining after a prince who doesn't know you exist is probably a bad call, and Ariel learns this the hard way. She, after spying on the Bachelor, finds out that he's interested in marrying a princess, which shouldn't come as a surprise to most because that's what princes usually do, but Ariel doesn't know what land people do, it's all brand new. So she witnesses a passionate kiss between royals and decides, that's it, no more. The poor girl tosses herself into the surf and becomes froth, like sea foam. This ending was seen as too dark at the time, so Hans Christian Andersen had to go back and change it up. Instead of the dying and becoming nasty foam atop seawater, she dies and then becomes a daughter of the air, waiting to go to heaven, which I guess is better, and she's still dead. Not by a whole lot, I guess. It's no wonder the story was changed up a bunch for more modern audiences. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Pied Piper. You definitely want to pay the magical man who can lure all the creatures out of your town, because just in case you forgot, your children are creatures too. The Pied Piper is a classic fairy tale with all of the classic fairy tale fixins. We got magic, we got rats, we got a man with a pipe, we got dumb and stupid villagers, we got a cave, we've got implications of child mistreatment, oh boy. So the more modern tale is pretty bleak too, but the original is wild. The one we know involved a man in a patchwork jacket coming to a rat-infested town and offering to do away with the rodents for a price. The villagers agree and off the Piper goes, and all the rats too. However, when he returns, they refuse to pay. What's a poor Piper to do? Well, he's actually got a plan. Lure all of the children away from the village. Revenge is sweet, isn't it? So he lures the children, and eventually the villagers notice, causing them to panic and then pay up. But everyone lives happily ever after, right? But sometimes, you don't get a chance to make things right. A theme that is explored in the original tale of the Piper. See, in true fairy tale style, he takes the kids away and seals them in a cave. How are the kids supposed to survive in a cave? Well, it's up to them. Yikes. Another even darker ending sees the Piper literally drown the children in a river. There's no going back after that, no saving them by spelunking. Some folks claim that the first Pied Piper had a penchant for doing unsavory things with the children too. Definitely not the simple morality tale we expected. Coming in at number 2, we've got Rumpelstiltskin. Why this terrible little man wants to steal a woman's firstborn child, we may never know, and to be honest, it's probably best that we don't know what his intentions are. Some things are better left unsaid. But there are details to this tale that are even darker and stranger than wanting to steal a child. I know it's hard to top that, but we'll try. So the story, famously performed in children's theater and also by the Muppets, goes a little something like this. A woman is poor and sad. Her dad claims that she can spin straw into gold, and now the king has locked her away in a room full of straw until she can prove her skills. Greasy gremlin man appears and tells her that he'll do it for her in exchange for her jewelry. The king isn't satisfied though and puts her in a bigger room full of straw. Without any jewelry left to give the gold spinning goblin, he says he'll do it again if she promises to give him her firstborn child. She agrees, gets the gold, and then marries the king. Years later, she's powerful and happy and pregnant. When she pops out a kid, Rumpelstiltskin comes to collect. But the woman doesn't want to give up her beautiful little baby, so she looks for a way out. Not exactly the best role model here, you know, going back on your deals, but we'll let it slide. For some reason, Rumpelstiltskin gives her an out. If she can guess his name within 3 days, she can keep the child. So the woman sneaks about, learns his name, and guesses correctly. Some versions say that poor Rumpelstiltskin gets mad and runs off, and that's that. But the darker version says he gets so mad that he stomps his foot into the ground, and it actually goes deep into the ground because he stomps so hard. And then when he tries to pull it out of the ground, he literally rips himself in half. What a sight that would be. And finally, at number 1, we've got Pinocchio. So many details from the original Pinocchio are kind of breezed over in the Disney version. This makes it more family friendly, but it gets a lot worse at teaching the lessons it wants to get across. Also, it's just less interesting overall. The story does play out similarly, but it's a whole lot darker for sure. First of all, Pinocchio, in a fit of childish rage, literally kills Jiminy Cricket for trying to give him advice. He tosses a hammer at the bug, who does not dodge in time and gets crushed. No more Jiminy after that. Scientists wept after not being able to study a talking insect. Pinocchio doesn't even feel bad about it. After this, he ends up burning his own feet off because he fell asleep above a stove. Ouch. Geppetto makes him some new ones, but honestly, he would have been better off without any. After this, he runs off and finds some weirdos who think planting gold coins will result in a golden coin tree, and then they literally hang him and leave him for dead. Good thing he's a puppet, not a real boy. Jeez, definitely a little darker than the Disney fair. Although getting swallowed whole by a whale isn't exactly lighthearted now, is it?